Why do the Japanese car companies beat the American car companies?
The auto sector has been a focal point in the tariff negotiations. Trump criticized how few American cars are on Japanese roads, citing safety standards.
As Japanese automakers try to figure out how to respond to tariffs imposed by the U.S.,
500,000 jobs, $1.3 trillion at stake. One tariff could shut it all down. If the U.S. imposes a 25% national security tariff on Japanese vehicles, the impact won't be limited to imports, it will gut America's own industrial core. Toyota, Honda, Nissan, and other Japanese brands don't just sell in the U.S., they build here. Over 500,000 American jobs from Alabama's assembly lines to Kentucky's steel mills depend on Japanese automakers. These companies contribute over $1.3 trillion in economic output, fueling factories, suppliers, logistics, tech startups, and tax revenue across more than a dozen states. But with one stroke of policy, that ecosystem could collapse. Decreased production, canceled expansion, layoffs, factory slowdowns. Not because the cars aren't selling, but because Washington changed the rules mid-game. And when you tear out the engine that keeps U.S. manufacturing humming, don't be surprised when the whole machine grinds to a halt. The proposed 25% tariff on Japanese vehicles may sound like a bold defense of American industry, but the numbers tell a very different story. According to projections from the Congressional Budget Office, the U.S. could lose between $18 and $28 billion per year in tax revenue. That includes corporate income tax, payroll tax, and Social Security contributions, all tied to the jobs and production currently generated by Japanese automakers in the U.S. Over just the first 3 years, total losses to the federal budget could hit $58 to $62 billion. That's enough to fund entire education or healthcare programs in auto-heavy states like Kentucky and Alabama. And the kicker? Even if the tariff brings in an estimated $78 billion in customs duties, it won't cover the damage. Why? Because that tax revenue is temporary, but the ripple effects are permanent. Higher borrowing costs, rising unemployment, and lost investment mean long-term economic drag that outpaces any short-term gain. It's not just a matter of trade balance.
So Trump complains that Japan doesn't buy our cars, yet we love Japanese cars, so why don't they buy our cars? American brands are generally pretty successful in Japan, so it can't be that, and no, it can't be tariffs either because Japan doesn't have any tariffs on imported vehicles like the...
It's a budgetary black hole opened by a single policy decision. The blow won't stop at federal spreadsheets. It hits where it hurts most, the job market. Japanese automakers currently support over 500,000 American jobs, including more than 96,000 direct factory workers, 600 in related supply chains, and 113,000 in support sectors like logistics, retail, and technical training. If the tariff is imposed, many of these jobs become economically unsustainable, especially in rural and industrial regions where Japanese firms are often the largest private employer. States like Ohio, Kentucky, Alabama, and Mississippi could see local unemployment rates jump by 1.8 to 2.6 percentage points. That's not a blip, that's recession territory. And it's not just auto workers, it's tool manufacturers, seat makers, IT consultants, cafeteria staff, and everyone else tied into the vast industrial web that feeds the modern vehicle supply chain. One tariff doesn't just raise prices at the dealership. It risks ripping out the industrial foundation beneath 500,000 American families. This isn't just about imported cars. It's about a system that now relies on Japanese automakers as core pillars of U.S. industry. In 2023 alone, 6.32 million Japanese brand vehicles were sold in the United States, accounting for 43.6% of the entire light vehicle market. That's not a side story, that's almost half the cars on American roads. Behind those numbers is a financial engine few people see. Total U.S. revenue from those vehicles reached $169.7 billion, with a staggering $31.3 billion returned to federal and state governments in the form of corporate income tax, payroll tax, and indirect levies. These contributions don't just fund road repairs or infrastructure, they help keep public schools, open hospitals running, and local economies stable in dozens of manufacturing-heavy districts. The brands responsible, Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Subaru, Mazda, Mitsubishi, and Suzuki, 7 Japanese giants that, far from weakening America's auto industry, have become deeply embedded within it. Which leads to the bigger question: if these brands retreat, what holds everything else together? Because what's at risk isn't just market share, it's a $1.3 trillion industrial ecosystem built around the presence of Japanese automakers on American soil. Every Toyota plant in Kentucky and every Honda line in Alabama feeds into a massive web of suppliers and subcontractors, from leather seat manufacturers in Ohio to after-sales tech developers in Las Vegas. More than 197,000 American workers are trained specifically in Japanese production systems, lean manufacturing, Kaizen just-in-time, and other models that have defined U.S. auto efficiency for decades. If these companies scale back or exit, the damage won't be contained to their factories. It will fracture the entire supply network, causing ripple effects from vacuum casting foundries to cable sensor workshops. This isn't just an economic disruption, it's an industrial unraveling. What took 30 years to build could start falling apart in 30 days. And no American brand, not even Ford or Tesla, is prepared to absorb that shock. Because once the supply chain snaps, it's not just production that halts.
Nissan is getting really desperate, and they're about to do something crazy to stay alive. Nissan just gave us another tragic update on their restructuring plans, and I really hope this one works out for them. Apparently now their global headquarters is likely to be sold off in order to keep the business afloat.
It's the momentum of U.S. manufacturing and the trust of the workers who keep it alive. On paper, it's just a tariff. In reality, it's the quiet dismantling of a decades-long engine of American productivity. Since the early 2000s, Japanese innovation embedded in U.S. factories has quietly boosted American manufacturing productivity by an average of 0.22 percentage points per year. That's not a number most people see, but it's a crucial ingredient in what economists call intangible GDP. It's the know-how, the systems thinking, the culture of continuous improvement, Kaizen and lean processes imported from Japan and perfected in U.S. plants. If Japanese firms pull out or even reduce their investment footprint, the R&D spillover effect dries up. That doesn't just affect car production. It hurts entire sectors that rely on those engineering partnerships. Vocational schools in Kentucky, STEM labs at Purdue, Georgia Tech, Michigan State, joint AI and robotics programs in Indiana and Ohio. When the R&D ecosystem breaks, America doesn't just lose cars. It loses the invisible growth that powered the next generation of industry. Let's talk about what really hits home the price tag. A 25% tariff on Japanese vehicles, especially hybrids and electrics, could push the average price per car up by $400. For working-class families already strained by inflation, that's a deal breaker. And here's the problem: there's no backup plan. Ford, GM, and even Tesla aren't ready to mass-produce hybrid vehicles at the scale needed to fill the gap. Industry insiders say it could take 18 to 24 months minimum to stand up new lines. So what happens in the meantime? Consumers delay purchases, used car prices spike again, loan applications drop, and worst of all, consumer confidence, the heartbeat of the economy, plunges. Because when Americans see showroom prices skyrocket and no domestic alternative in sight, the narrative shifts. Buy American turns into wait it out. And that kind of hesitation can be just as dangerous as a recession. Japan holds over $1.06 trillion in U.S. Treasury securities, making it one of the largest foreign holders of American debt. That number isn't just a statistic, it's a lever of influence. And in the context of a trade dispute, it becomes a potential weapon. If Tokyo chose to respond to a 25% auto tariff by offloading even a small fraction of those holdings, say just 5%, it would mean flooding the market with $53 billion in treasuries. Analysts estimate that such a move could raise 10-year yields by 30 to 45 basis points almost immediately. That's not a theoretical shift. It's a direct hit to the cost of borrowing for the entire U.S. economy. Interest payments on the national debt would climb. Mortgage rates, auto loans, and business credit would all rise in tandem. And most critically, it would undercut the Federal Reserve's delicate effort to contain inflation without triggering a recession, at a time when the U.S. is already grappling with elevated deficits and tightening credit conditions. A bond market shock from Japan could accelerate the cycle of fiscal stress. Higher yields mean more expensive debt service. That means more taxpayer dollars going toward interest and fewer going toward infrastructure, social programs, or economic stimulus. It also puts upward pressure on inflation just as households are already strained by rising costs. In short, what begins as a targeted tariff on imported vehicles could spiral into a broader financial backlash, not from political enemies, but from a longtime ally with deep exposure to American bonds. The U.S. would be punishing Japanese imports and paying for it with its own economic stability. Japanese cars dominate key segments of the US market: hybrids and subcompact SUVs. They didn't get there through flashy marketing or fleeting trends. They earned that position through a reputation for reliability, fuel efficiency, and affordability that's been built over decades. For millions of Americans, brands like Toyota, Honda, and Subaru represent not just vehicles but peace of mind. But if a 25% tariff is imposed, that trust could become a liability. A price increase of $4,000 or more per vehicle isn't just a number, it's a trigger. That kind of spike doesn't only reduce monthly affordability, it shifts the entire psychology of the purchase. More Americans will delay buying new cars, pivot to the used market, or simply hold on to their current vehicles longer. This shift doesn't make headlines. It doesn't come with protests or breaking news alerts. It happens in silence, in showrooms where families quietly walk away, and in driveways where older cars get one more oil change instead of being replaced. And that subtle, gradual hesitation is devastating in an industry where success depends on consistent, predictable consumer behavior. When brand loyalty turns into uncertainty, when trust becomes a financial burden instead of an advantage, the entire structure of demand reshapes itself. Automakers can't just lower prices or release a new ad campaign to win back customers. Because once consumer confidence falters, especially in a high-ticket, long-cycle industry like autos, rebuilding it can take years. And if that hesitation becomes habit, no tariff can undo the damage. There's no quick fix for losing Japanese automakers. The US doesn't have a parallel supply chain ready to replace them, not in scale, not in speed, not in sophistication. Even if Ford, GM, or Tesla launched emergency expansions tomorrow, it would take at least 22 months just to clear permits and build new facilities. In the meantime, production gaps will emerge, vehicle inventories will shrink, prices will spike. Consumer confidence, already fragile, could drop by 6 to 8 points according to industry surveys. And once confidence breaks, it doesn't just affect auto sales, it ripples into retail credit and household spending. This isn't about patriotism or preference, it's about capacity. And the simple truth is, the US can't build what Japan already does not yet. For decades, Japanese manufacturers didn't just bring cars to America, they brought discipline, productivity, and process innovation. From Kaizen to just-in-time delivery, they reshaped US manufacturing standards. A 25% tariff might punish foreign companies, but it also threatens to erase decades of silent gains that kept American factories globally competitive. If Japan pulls back, the US won't just lose a few brands. It could lose the invisible engine that's powered its industrial revival. Because when the tools of progress are mistaken for threats, what you protect today may be exactly what you lose tomorrow. Do you think the 25% tariff is a strategic shield or a self-inflicted wound to US manufacturing? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. We break down the policies that shape your paycheck, your purchases, and your country's future.